Easier for me to deal with the loss the first time as compared to the second time, because I had told myself that I'm doing things right, I know what's going to happen, and I can prepare for it. Still, I didn't understand what was happening. I was in active labor, and before I even reached the hospital, I gave birth to my daughter in the car. My name is Tshego Gaabakwe. I'm 31 years old. I live in Bramfisher, Soweto. I was born there and raised there. I am the last born of 3 girls. My parents were blessed with 3 daughters, and I am the last born. I'm a pastor's kid. Both my parents are pastors, but my dad unfortunately passed away last year. I attended Horizon View Primary School, and then later on went to Princess High School for my first year of high school. When I was 14, just as I said that my parents are pastors, when I was 14, we relocated to Botswana on missionary work, where my dad was meant to start a church. I lived there from the age of 14 until I finished high school. And when I was 21, I came back to South Africa, and I lived in Pretoria, where I was studying at UP. So I am a research analyst. That's what I studied, and that's what I do for a living. Fast forward to 2015, I fell pregnant, and I was very excited when I found out that I would be having my first child, and I did everything that was necessary on my part, registering for my prenatals and attending all my checkups. So when I was going into my 3rd trimester, when I was 7 months, I had gone for my prenatal checkup, and I requested for a sauna. So this was at a public clinic. So when I requested for a sauna, they told me that they don't do saunas for gender reveal. So I would have to go to a private clinic. And I did so. This was in November, if I'm not mistaken. And when I got to the clinic and I did the scan, the doctor told me that something is wrong, and he's going to refer me to a hospital where I can get checked properly by gynecologists. At this point, I did not realize that anything was wrong with me. As this was my first pregnancy, I didn't pick up the red flags or the signs that something was wrong with me. Little did I know that all the months that I had been attending my prenatals, my blood pressure had been climbing steadily, and it was not picked up by the healthcare professionals. Or was it negligence? I'm not sure, but I didn't even know what was going on. So then I was referred to a hospital. Upon my arrival at the hospital, the doctor told me that I had to be admitted immediately because my blood pressure was somewhere around 185 over 120, but it was very high, and I was close to having a stroke. So I was admitted in hospital, and at this point I still didn't understand what was happening, what was causing this. And I remember the doctor saying to me, this baby won't make it, so we'll have to see the next time. And I was admitted in hospital. I stayed in hospital for 4 days, and when I was discharged, I was given a whole lot of medication that I was supposed to take to regulate my blood pressure, and a diet that I was supposed to take. So I took time off work, I think about 2 weeks, and I was just staying home, taking my medication. So then after that 2 weeks, I went back to work. And it so happened that at the end of that week, we had our year-end function. And for the year-end function, we were traveling to Hartbeespoort for the weekend. And I felt okay because I didn't really know what was happening to me physically. But we traveled for the NDO function on a Friday. And everything seemed okay to me. I was still taking my medication as prescribed on Saturday. Until we were supposed to be there until Sunday. So on Saturday evening, I started experiencing cramps. So when I called in with the doctor, because I was far from home, they told me that it could be Braxton Hicks contractions, with the body basically just preparing itself for childbirth. But they got more and more intense as the night went, and now I was starting to get worried because I was far from home, and it would not be easy for me to get hold of my parents or anyone who could help me. So on Sunday morning around 5 a.m., I woke up and I was in excruciating pain. So the first thought was for me to get to the nearest hospital as soon as possible. It took about 2 hours trying to call an ambulance, and because of the area, they kept referring us to different dispatch, telling us that it's either Gauteng or Northwest, but it was a lot, and we didn't have any cars on the premises. So eventually we called my boss, who then drove down to Artis and took me to the hospital. And at this point I was in active labor, but I didn't understand what was happening. I was in active labor, and before I even reached the hospital, I gave birth to my daughter in the car. So I reached the hospital and she had already passed on. So she passed on while she was still in my womb. So then I was admitted in the hospital and I was cleaned, and they explained that the condition that I had was preeclampsia, which is gestational hypertension, where my blood pressure gets high because I'm pregnant. So I was released from hospital, and I didn't have a burial for my daughter because she was underweight. So they incinerated her at the hospital. It took me time to get over what happened and to try and heal. But I told myself that, it was the first time that I got pregnant, and hopefully going forward, God willing, that I would have children of my own. Fast forward to 2021, I fell pregnant towards the end of last year. And I did have those thoughts in the back of my mind of the same thing happening again, because they did tell me that it's a recurring condition. So if you have it in your first pregnancy, chances are you will have it going forward. But I felt that I was better equipped because I knew about the condition, so I could regulate it earlier. I went for all my prenatals, and then when I was 6 months pregnant, they picked up the blood pressure again, and I was placed on medication. After a week, when I went back for the checkup, my blood pressure had regulated. So unfortunately, the nurse who was attending me then lessened the dosage of the medication I was taking, which was an error at the time. So my blood pressure continued to climb. And I remember the second week of June, I had just gone into my third trimester again. So I was around 29 weeks. I felt the movements of my baby not being as I'm used to them. So I quickly rushed to the clinic. And when I got to the clinic, the nurse checked the pulse of the baby. And she said there was a heartbeat, that I should go home and stop stressing. But because of what had happened previously, I was very, very concerned. So I went home, and she said I should observe for 24 hours. If nothing changes, I should go to the hospital. So nothing happened for 24 hours. I still didn't feel any movement. So I woke up the next day and I went to the hospital. I didn't go to the clinic anymore. So upon my arrival at the hospital, I was taken to the maternity ward where I was checked, and then they discovered that my child had passed away again. And from the time that I went to the clinic, according to what the doctor told me, that when I had gone to the clinic, he already was not living. So the doctor was wondering, when the nurse said to me she got a heartbeat, which heartbeat was she picking up? So then they asked for my history, and I told them everything. So the doctors were concerned about why the dosage of my medication was lessened, because then that means my blood pressure didn't stabilize. So I was admitted in hospital again, because this time I was going to be induced into labor. I was in hospital for 5 days because the first dose of the inducing medication didn't work. So eventually they gave me a second dose, and it did work, and I gave birth to my son. So because I was a bit later in my pregnancy, the hospital could not incinerate him. So we had to have a burial for my child. So a week after I was released from hospital, and then we had a burial for my son. It's been a really difficult journey for me, especially me believing in God and trusting in God, asking myself, what was the purpose, or what is the purpose of me having to experience something like this? And I try not to blame God about it, because He knows the bigger picture and what is supposed to happen or what is not supposed to happen in my life. After I was released from hospital, I tried to commit suicide, because I couldn't handle everything that I was feeling and everything that I was going through. And I just felt that it would be better if I was not alive. I looked at a lot of people who had kids, who didn't care about them, who didn't love them, who didn't give them what they needed. And I was denied that opportunity not once, but twice. And my faith in God is what has kept me strong, because I don't think that I would be alive if I didn't believe that He knows what He has planned for me and what I'm supposed to take away from this. I'm still in my healing journey. I'm still trying to discover what lesson I'm supposed to learn from this, and going forward, what I should do with everything that I've experienced, not only for myself, but for other people who have gone through similar experiences. With my second child, I remember the day that I went into labor. The doctor had booked me to go and see a psychologist before they could release me from hospital, just to check if I was emotionally and mentally stable. And when I came back from psychology, I went back to my ward and I went into labor without actually feeling anything. And I remember being in the delivery room and saying to the doctor who was assisting me, when she was telling me that, okay, you need to push now. And I was saying to her, how am I supposed to push knowing that I'm giving birth to a dead baby? People are in hospital going through that pain, knowing that once the child is out, they have that blessing. But I know that my child is already dead. And that was the difference between the second time and the first time, because the first time when I went into labor, I didn't know that the child had already passed away. So it was easier for me to deal with the loss the first time as compared to the second time, because I had told myself that I'm doing things right, I know what's going to happen, and I can prepare for it. I went into a total state of depression the minute I came out of hospital, because I think when I was in hospital, it hadn't sunk in exactly what was happening until I came home from the hospital, and I didn't have a child, I didn't have anything. It was just me. And I went into depression immediately. It was not gradual. I would spend days not getting out of bed because I felt like I had nothing to live for. I felt like my own body was betraying me because I couldn't do something that so many people can do, and it's so easy for them. I blamed myself so much. I kept asking myself, what could I have done differently? If I had felt that his movements were not the same earlier, I could have gone to the hospital. Maybe they could have saved him. And I went into depression. I stopped working. I stopped doing anything. I would just stay in bed day and night. And that's when I tried to commit suicide. I took the pills, and just as I was drinking the pills, my sister found me, and she walked into my room and she was asking me what's going on. And from then on, she suggested that I should go for counseling. So I was booked for counseling, but it was through my church that I started going for counseling. And as I started going for that counseling and attending the counseling, I started accepting the reality for what it was, because that's what I struggled with the most, to accept that this is my reality. There's a statement that the doctor who was helping me to give birth said to me as she left my room. She said to me, I know that at this point it may seem like it's bleak for you, but I want you to never stop trying. And I do want to have children. That's, I think, the most painful thing about it, because I do have a yearning for it. And everywhere that I go, I see little children or pregnant people. It really gets to me. But at the same time, I have a fear of doing it again, because I'm so afraid of the same thing happening to me again. But I've found solace in prayer, in my faith, in my family, in my friends who are constantly there for me, who are encouraging me. And I do believe that, not that the pain goes away, but once I've healed, I will definitely try again. My name is Tshego Gaabakwe, and I have been through the most.